Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the How to Create an Actionable Strategic Fund Development Plan webinar. My name is Hihershi Basuego, and I'm a member of the Nonprofit Effectiveness Team at the Boston Foundation. This webinar is part of a series of workshops that TBF offers to nonprofits that build leaders' knowledge and ability in areas most relevant to their work. Our facilitator and trainer for today's training is Kenny Weill, Principal of K. Weill Consulting Group, and he's dedicated the past 15 years providing strategic consultation, trainings, resources, and hands-on fundraising assistance to nonprofits of all types and sizes. Before I hand it off to Kenny, I just wanted to let you all know that we'll be using the chat box exclusively for questions and answers to minimize audio issues and interference. Also, this webinar will be recorded, so if for some reason you lose your connection, don't worry. We'll plan to follow up with all registrants with a copy of the slides as well as a link to the recording. That's it for our housekeeping. Kenny, would you like to take the floor from here?
I would. Thank you so much, Hihershi, and welcome everybody. I appreciate you being here and taking time out of what I'm sure are busy work schedules to spend some time with us. So what I'd like to do is sort of dive right in and tell you sort of, I guess how I'm going to frame today's discussion. So what I want to do is sort of divide it into three areas. And the first area I want to just talk about pretty briefly is where do we want to go? Where does your organization want to go? What's its organizational goals, that should come out of a strategic plan? Essentially, why do you need to raise more money, okay? And that's really a critical first step before we can even create a plan. So we'll talk a bit about that, and then we're going to spend more time on where your organization is now, right? So this is the assessment phase. So the fund development plan is a lot more than just sitting down and writing a plan. You actually need to do some research, some assessment of your organization's internal capacity to be successful in fundraising and in achieving your revenue goals and thus the goals of your organization. Okay, so we'll spend more time on that. And then, of course, we'll talk about how do we get there. Well, this is the plan, right? The plan is your roadmap to take you from where your organization is now to where it wants to go. Okay, just want to draw your attention. There are we've got like 5 handouts that you can download right from this webinar. We will be sending you these 5 as well as a few more after the webinar as well. So you don't have to download these right now, but they are there for your reference. Okay. And then just feel free to ask questions at any time using the chat function, which should be on the right panel of your screen. And I'll pause periodically to check with Hihershi to see if any questions have come in and to respond to them. Okay, so I'm sure some of you know this adage: if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And while I can't see any of you, I do care deeply about each and every one of you, and I really don't want you to fail. So, but it is amazing to me, and I've been doing consulting to nonprofits for 15 years, and it's amazing what a small proportion of the nonprofit leaders that I've worked with have a fundraising plan, have logic models for their programs, have a plan for targeting potential investors, and those other key planning pieces in place. But the truth is, when you don't plan, you're simply shooting from the hip with no realistic goals, little buy-in, possibly disengaged stakeholders. When you take the time to plan, on the other hand, the implementation actually becomes more purposeful, easier, and will reap much better results. Okay? So I'm probably preaching to the choir because you guys have all signed up for this webinar, but I just wanted to reinforce that point. So again, the strategic plan of your organization is it answers the question, what are we doing as an organization and where are we going, right? Once you know that, then you figure out, well, how much is it going to cost to get there, right? And so that's the amount of money you need to raise. That's your revenue goal. And then your fundraising plan answers the question, okay, well, now we know what the revenue goal is. How are we going to pay for it, right? And, let me just say that planning really pays off. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Stanford Social Innovation Review, it's a really great publication, and you can read a lot of it online. But this study was done a little over a year ago by Third Space Studio, and they looked at a whole bunch of nonprofits, on the small size, and they had a couple of interesting. So what they were looking at was, which of them have fundraising plans, which don't have fundraising plans, and then they were asking other questions about, sort of return on investment. And so one of their key findings, as you can see here, is that those that have a fundraising plan, for every $10,000 investment they make in the salary of a fundraiser, they actually saw a $42,500 increase in individual donations. Compared with those organizations that did not have a fundraising plan, there was actually no correlation between the two. And then the second finding, again, for those that have a plan, each full-time person working on individual giving raised on average $280,000. For those without a plan, there was actually no correlation between the two either. Again, this isn't necessarily showing causation, but it is interesting correlation. And I think it also points to the value of investing in your development infrastructure to achieve, high return on investment, but you need to do that with a plan, okay? So I just want to spend one slide on sort of where your organization wants to go, right? And so hopefully most of your organizations have a strategic plan, and it's one that you're actually using, right? And if you don't, hopefully you have some other comparable planning document or some process you go through, so that you're looking 3 to 5 years out and you're sort of determining, hey, these are goals for our organization, these are goals for our programs. We're looking to create a new program or expand a current one or move to a different geography, whatever they may be. I have a client now, so they brought me on to do just this, to do a fundraising plan. And, at the time they said, we're actually going to be completing a strategic plan in the next couple of months. And I was thinking, okay, it's not ideal because I'd love to have the strategic plan done already, but okay, we'll figure it out. Well, it turns out now they won't get the strategic plan done until the fall. So that's a problem, right? Because again, without that strategic plan, without those organizational goals, it's hard to figure out, okay, well, what are the revenue goals sort of associated with, their growth, and so, then from that you determine, okay, well, how are we going to pay for it and create a fundraising plan. So having something like this in place before you do a fundraising plan is really important. With that, let's just talk a little bit about the revenue goal, right? So fundamentally, right, whatever your your strategic plan is, whatever your growth goals are, you're going to obviously have costs associated with that, right? And I have an exercise, which is not one of the handouts, but it'll be emailed to you, which helps you to sort of walk through, okay, these are the goals, these are the outcomes, and this is the stuff we need to be successful, right? And then this is how much that stuff is going to cost. Is it IT? Is it space? Is it equipment? Is it staff? Whatever it is. Okay. So you obviously create your budgets based on your goals, right? And so essentially you want to raise enough revenue to be able to cover those costs, right? We are nonprofit organizations, so you want at the least ideally you're covering those costs, and if you raise more money than the budgeted expenditures, that's great. You can put them in operating reserves, or if you have an endowment, you can throw them in there. So essentially, right, you've got if you do nothing else next year compared to this, right, if everything else stays the same, you need to raise enough money to cover the costs, pretty much the same costs as this year. But if you are looking to grow and there are additional costs associated with that growth, then you need to raise that additional money as well, right? So those are those incremental costs. And I've often been asked, well, for various things, Kenny, what's a good return on investment? Is it 300%? Is it 500% for a particular campaign or fundraising event? Honestly, to me, that's a little irrelevant, right? It doesn't matter that much. Really, this is what's important: is that you're generating enough revenue to cover the costs associated with your planned growth. Okay. And so we're going to revisit, I should say, the revenue goal after we go through the assessment phase, which is the next thing we're going to talk about. Because sometimes, nonprofits will create a revenue goal for the next fiscal year that's really not grounded in reality. It happens, right? And I have a client example, which I'll share with you in a few minutes, that did just that. So what I want to do is I want to move on to the assessment. But before I do, let's talk a little bit about the planning process, right? So your leadership has said, let's do a fundraising plan. We've got a strategic plan. We know sort of what our planned expenditures are, so we know what our revenue goals are. So let's do it. Let's figure out a plan to achieve those goals. So what I want to do is I want to discuss the planning process now, because the team that you're going to assemble will first do the assessment work to answer the question, where are we now? And so, the important takeaway here is that I don't recommend that any one individual tries to sit down and do a fundraising plan in sort of a silo. Because usually that's not going to be successful, and usually it's not going to have the buy-in that you're going to need to be able to, kind of successfully implement that plan. And this happened to me. I had a client I had worked with for several years, and I knew the organization well, pretty large organization down on the South Shore of Massachusetts. And so the executive director said, I want to do a fundraising plan. Kenny, can you do this for us? And basically, she just assumed I was just going to kind of write it up and then, hand it in a sense. And I did push back on her and said, I really want to work with a team, some staff, board members, so that we can do this together. It is really critical, particularly if you need to, as part of your plan, you need to advocate for resources. Again, having that buy-in is really important. And so, if your organization has a fundraising committee or a development committee, whatever you call it, this is a great job for them to do, is to work on the fundraising plan. If you don't have a fundraising committee, I strongly recommend that you create one, particularly if you're a small, the small to mid-sized organization. But any nonprofit would benefit from having one. And then whoever is on this group, this committee, to create the fundraising plan, it is important that one person is assigned to kind of lead the charge, right? So that there's accountability built in, and this person is really driving the group to complete this plan, within a particular time frame. And my experience, when I work with clients on this, it can take a few months. In fact, rarely can I get it done in 2 months. It's probably more 3+ months to really do it, right? Because particularly if I'm working with maybe board members or committee members who are volunteers, who, or even staff who've got a lot of other stuff on their plates, you usually have to carve out a few months to get this done. And the ideal circumstance is that you start crafting the fundraising plan, a few months, 3 months before the start of your fiscal year, so that it's done and you're ready to go when your fiscal year hits. But that's the ideal circumstance, but that often is not reality. So that's the planning process. So before I get to move on to the assessment piece, are there anybody chat any questions yet?
Not yet, Kenny.
Okay. So guys, just remember you can use the chat box anytime a question arises. Feel free to just type it in there. All right. So let's move on. So again, where I spend most of my time, to be honest, when I'm doing a fundraising plan is, before I even sit down to write anything, is I do an assessment, right? And there's a lot to assess, so I'm going to go over it over the next several slides. And one thing I'm looking at is sort of the infrastructure of the nonprofit, right? So first of all, I'm sure most of you who are listening in today know, where your revenue is coming from, right? You know how much is coming in from individuals, from grants, from a fundraising event, from corporate sponsorships, whatever. But I'm guessing that not everybody knows exactly how much you're spending on fundraising or development, and that's really critical to be able to track that. And so I highly recommend that you have some sort of a development budget, and it would include obviously any staff that's dedicated to development, a development director or associate. But even percentage of your executive director's time, right? Because hopefully your ED is spending significant time, being out there and developing relationships with folks, and fundraising is relationship development. So sort of a percentage of your ED's time on fundraising should be part of the budget. If you've got an accountant or a business manager that's, some of their work is dedicated to gifts processing and report generation, you can include that as well. So have a fund, it's important. So I'll again, when I'm working with a nonprofit, I'm looking to see whether they have a fundraising, a development budget, because obviously, at the most basic level, you want to make sure that you're, bringing in more money than you're spending on fundraising, right? The other thing I do is I gather all the job descriptions I can. So executive director, all the different development staff, even some program staff, and I look at the job descriptions, see, are there responsibilities written in there related to fundraising? Number one, and then number two, I interview folks and say, okay, let's look at your job description together. Are you doing these things? How much time are you spending on these things? And oftentimes they're kind of there's an inequity there, right? Or there's what's in the job description is oftentimes not exactly what folks are spending time on. So I will look at that as part of this sort of process. And also again, just with staying with staff, I do look because I'm sure many of you have heard about or sort of thought through the notion of having sort of a culture, a fundraising culture organization-wide. So, that program staff understand that they have a role to play as well. So again, I'm just trying to, glean sort of this information as I'm assessing the organization. And then just staying with infrastructure, I'll also just look at sort of, fundraising processes, what are the written protocols, how is the data being gathered and used, right? So hopefully many of you are using some sort of a donor database or what's known as a CRM, which stands for Constituent or Client Relationship Management System. These are very powerful systems. I'm sure many of you have heard of Salesforce. They do have a product for nonprofits that I'm guessing some of you are using, but there are many many low-cost and powerful CRM products out on the market, and I highly recommend just to go off on a little tangent, but I highly recommend no matter what the size of your organization is that you invest in the CRM to track all of your fundraising activities and beyond that, right? I mean, they look more holistically at all of your constituents, right? Because one constituent could be a volunteer, could be a donor, could be an alumnus, and so on. So they're pretty great systems. So when I'm assessing, I am looking to see, do they have a CRM, or are they just using Excel, and are they generating useful reports, right? I mean, so are you, looking at, generating reports on a regular basis from whatever system you're using that helps drive decisions around fundraising, okay? And, the bottom line just with infrastructure is, what I'm trying to learn is whether this nonprofit needs to invest in, are there gaps? Do they need to invest in some infrastructure in order to help them attain their revenue goals? Okay. And then there's the board of directors. And, and my apologies to any board members who are on the line now, but I'll be as gentle as I can here. But so obviously it's very common, right, to have a board. I mean, I get this all the time, right? Well, my board's not really a fundraising board, right? That's a very common scenario. I'm sure, for those of you who are staff, and even you may be some frustrating board members on the line right now. I'm guessing you're facing this, and it's challenging because, frankly, resource development, securing resources for your organization should be one of the top roles of a board member. Being a fiduciary steward for the nonprofit and then securing resources, those are like the top two roles. Yet most boards don't do this. Many boards members don't really know that that's their role. And so I don't always fully blame the board, because oftentimes board members are brought on without that expectation, without the expectation that they need to develop relationships and resources for the organization. And I know that's a challenge for I'm guessing for many folks who are on the line right now. And then there's a scenario where actually, yeah, they do have expectations around fundraising, but they're not held accountable. There's no system put in place. The board chair, the executive director are not sort of holding them accountable to meet those expectations around resource development. So it's a challenge, but certainly when I'm assessing sort of a nonprofit's ability to meet their revenue goals, I'm always looking at that as well. There is something in your, well, it's one of the handouts that you can download, but it'll also be emailed to you, which is sort of a useful tool that I've developed that, some of my clients really like. And basically, it's kind of a checklist of fundraising expectations for board members. And the way it's formatted is that sort of the top half are things that are required activities of every board. And when you take a look at it, you'll see they're really not very heavy lifting. And in fact, none of them are sort of sitting down with a potential donor and asking them for money. There are things like, invite at least one donor to a fundraiser for your organization, write a personal note on at least 20 appeal letters, follow up with a thank you call, or things like that. Memorize the organization's elevator pitch, and so on. And of course, donate to the organization. Make some sort of a gift, meaningful gift to the organization. So pretty straightforward stuff that every board member has to do. And then the second half of this sheet, this fundraising expectations sheet, lists sort of additional activities. And what your board member can do is just select. It's like a menu of options, and they can just select two that they're going to do, right? So, host a house party fundraiser, or actually go with your executive director to meet with a major donor, or join the development committee, and so on. So anyway, you can check it out at your leisure, but it's something you may want to consider. And what's cool about this, I should mention, is that on the bottom, your board member, each board member has to sign it. Okay, so they understand the expectations. They select, a couple of those other ones that might be slightly heavier lifting, but not that bad, and then they sign it, at the beginning of your fiscal year. So what you've done is you've just built in, you created the expectations, and then you've built in accountability. So something to think about. So again, just staying with the board, the other thing that I'll look at is diversity of the board. Both sort of in terms of racial and ethnic backgrounds, so just to make sure that they kind of mirror your constituents, your clients, but also of experience, right? I mean, do you have all the needed expertise and experience and skills represented on your board? And there's different tools for this. Where you can do sort of a gap analysis, they're called, and some of you probably have gone through this, where you can sort of determine what those gaps are in diversity and experience. One of your, I don't think it's a handout here, but it'll be emailed to you, is one of these sort of gap and asset analyses worksheets that was created by Simone Joyeux, who's a great consultant, and she's written a lot on sort of boards and fundraising, and she's excellent. But that'll be emailed to you, and you can take a look at that. It's a pretty good template. Okay. And then, I'm also sure, again, as I'm assessing the board's role, I'm trying to determine, well, where's, is there training that's needed as well? Okay. So the board, really important role around resource development, again, to help you achieve those revenue goals. So that's part of the important part of the assessment. Okay, so something that I always do is a SWOT analysis. And now I'm guessing many of you have done a SWOT analysis, possibly as part of a strategic plan. But for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's, SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so strengths and weaknesses are looking internal at your organization. And so, so what I do is I do sort of a fundraising SWOT. So things that could impact, again, resource development and fundraising. And so examples of strengths and weaknesses, things that are internal to your organization, could be, we just don't have the capacity to get enough grant proposals out the door, or our database is really outdated, we're not able to generate useful donor reports, or, a strength is our executive director has really strong ties to the local funding community, right? And then opportunities and threats, you're looking external to your organization. So this is about the environment in which your nonprofit is working. And so just examples of this, as many of you are probably feeling is coming down the pike, is that, there may be federal, cuts in the federal budget, cuts to that can, going to trickle down and impact nonprofits. And even if you yourself, your organization does not get funding from the federal government or even the state government, it's going to impact those that do, which is going to increase competition for private dollars, right? So that's an example of sort of a external threat that you might be facing. Or maybe there's a national nonprofit that just opened a branch, if you will, in your city, and they're doing comparable work that your organization does. So that could be considered, that competition could be considered a threat. Or another opportunity could be, you work with schools and a new school just opened, or you have a new potential collaboration with a school, which is going to really enable you to increase the number of youth you serve. Okay, so I recommend the SWOT analysis. I literally will sit down. I could do it in an hour discussion with the board and staff, or board and executive staff, hour and a half tops, and I'll get some really useful information out of there. And then and by the way, again, so one of your handouts is sort of a template that you can use for SWOT analysis. It's like a two-pager. The first page has those internal factors, the strengths and weaknesses, and the idea is you sort of talk about, you brainstorm, what are our strengths, and then how can we kind of leverage those or exploit those, and then what are our weaknesses, and how can we, what are ways to minimize or reduce those, and then you do the same thing with those external factors, right? Opportunities, how can we leverage those, and threats, how can we kind of minimize those? So you can check out that at your leisure. Again, so I'll usually follow the SWOT analysis up with sort of individual calls or meetings with key stakeholders, could be funders, clients, collaborators, trying to get a sense of, what are the perceptions of this organization out in the community, what's its reputation, what are communications, what sort of communications do you receive from, this organization, are they useful, what information would you like to get from them? And then the other thing I do is I look at trends, right? So I ask, if possible, if your organization can generate it, take a look 5 years back and really look at donors, donations, retention rates, and really try to see what the trends are. Review your campaigns and events, and how successful are they, and have they become more successful over time? Are you netting more money over time, or are you actually netting less, is the revenue shrinking from these campaigns? So I will do that with clients to really try to understand what the trends are as well. Okay, so the last piece about the assessment is, and this is something that I've been doing, sort of a lot of thinking about over the last, I guess, couple of years, and even I'm doing some presenting, and for what it's worth, I'm actually going to present just on this topic on May 10th at Associated Grantmakers, if you guys are in the Boston area. But anyway, I call it organizational positioning for fundraising success, and I kind of look at these 5 areas, and what I found is, in just working with lots of nonprofit leaders over the years, that those that are doing these 5, that have kind of made these 5 shifts, are most successful in fundraising, right? And it has to do with planning. Again, we're talking about planning right now, but taking the time to plan more, the fundraising plan, of course. Planning on how strategically on how to approach various segments of investors, marketing plans, and so on. Taking a leadership role in defining those expectations around fundraising and holding folks accountable. Investing in your capacity to fundraise, actually making investments that will reap a high return. I mean the case for support, or case statement, which I think is the crux of all fundraising. It really is. And so taking the time to develop a really compelling case for support. Doesn't have to be for a particular campaign, just for your organization. And then, from that, driving, many different media and many different formats, from a tweet to talking points to an elevator pitch, and training, your ambassadors, your staff, and your board and others on your case for support. So the message is going out really consistently. And then relationships, really about, fundraising is really about relationship development, and so how that's done. And so these 5 shifts that, it's just in thinking about, is your organization really fundraising ready? These are things to think about. And again, I think you'll be emailed this, but also you can download this handout right from this webinar. It's sort of a self-assessment you can do that's broken out into these 5 areas. And it relates, again, to sort of assessing where your organization is now and whether it's ready to successfully achieve your fundraising goals. And so here's the cool thing, when I go through this assessment process with whatever team I'm working with a nonprofit client, what I find every time is that strategy, like themes just percolate right up, and these themes become the strategies that frame the fundraising plan. It happens every time. It's really kind of cool. So I really recommend that you take the time to do an assessment, using some of these, sort of suggestions I have, and I'm sure you've got others, and that will really help drive the strategies that comprise your strategic plan. Okay. Well, I guess before I move to this, any questions, Hiroshi, sort of on the assessment piece? Anything come in?
No, we have a few. It's a technical question, but not about the content. So.
Okay. I must be crystal clear. All right. All right. Let's keep going. So as I alluded to before, so after you do go through the assessment, I want you to look at your revenue goals again, right? And I want you to take a look at them. And again, I know I'm beating the dead horse here, but you want to make sure, of course, that they're aligned with where you want to go, right? With the costs associated with your planned growth. But importantly, are they realistic in terms of where you are now, right? And we just went through, how you can determine, really get a sense of where you are now. So, related back to your SWOT, do your revenue goals take into account, any weaknesses and threats? Do they build upon your strengths? Do they take advantage of opportunities? And do they take into account, other assessment findings, around your board and infrastructure? I have a client now that wonderful nonprofit based in Boston. They do great work around workforce development and youth development. They had a budget for FY16, which was around 1.1 million. That's what they wanted to raise for revenue, 1.1 million or so. They ended up raising about 660,000. So they really didn't even come close, right? And what did they do when they were determining the FY17 budget? They went right back up to 1.1 million again for the revenue goal, without any plan or any real changes, in terms of how they're going to do that, considering, their track record from the year before. So it really wasn't a realistic goal. And in fact, we're in FY17 and they're not coming close to it again. So I'm trying to work with them on that. But again, so you want it to be realistic. And so if it's not, as you're revisiting and you're realizing like, oh, okay, at this point, these goals are not realistic, then you need to either reduce your revenue goals or revisit your planned expenditures, right? And see whether any of those can be reduced. And then the other piece around, revenue goals is, looking at revenue by source. And, are you putting all your eggs in one basket, or, are you striving for some sort of diversity in funding? And, of course, one of the most important areas to look, of course, is individual giving. As many of you may know, individual giving, in terms of private giving to nonprofits nationwide, comprises around 80%. 80% is from individuals, roughly 15% is from foundations, and roughly 5% is from corporations. Right? And in fact, looking at charitable giving in 2015, there was an increase of roughly $10 billion in giving by individuals from the year before. Single largest contributor, and it comprised about 67% of the total change of giving from the year before. And remember, individual gifts, by and large, are unrestricted gifts. So, again, that's my little bully pulpit about that. But certainly, you want to see about diversifying your revenue sources. And another handout has a really good table that just breaks out revenue by source that you may want to check out. I think they do a good job. Unfortunately, I don't know where I got it, so I didn't create it, and I don't know who to give credit to. But you may want to look at that and use that when you're thinking about, okay, we have our revenue goals, they're realistic, they're aligned with where we want to go, but now we need to determine, okay, what percentage is coming from foundations and earned income and government support and so on, and individuals. So check that out. Okay, so your revised revenue goals now are your how much. We figured that out, and so the work to follow is the fundraising plan, right? This is how we're going to raise that money. Okay, so why don't we sort of move on to that? So just some characteristics of your fundraising plan. Again, I'm not going to say, obviously it relates to the strategic plan. I've said that many times. The plan itself needs to be realistic, right? It's in terms of taking into account fundraising readiness. And the plan should be time-bound. So what's a good time frame for a fundraising plan? This varies. I tend to keep them actually pretty short, like 12 to 18 months. I've done 24-month plans, but I definitely don't like to go beyond 24 months. I just find there's just too many variables. You can have sort of, if you've got a 3 or 5 year strategic plan, I think you can have some general goals that are longer term for your fundraising plan beyond 2 years. But in terms of the real specific stuff, work, and the content of the plan, I like to keep it to the next 12 to 18 months if possible. The way I create plans, I make them really detailed and really actionable, not just general, sort of like ideas, or I'd like to keep it really specific, and I'm going to show you an example of that in just a minute. Importantly, your plan needs to build in accountability, and we'll be talking about that more in a few minutes as well. But it's critical to build in who's doing what, in what time frames, right? Without accountability, a lot of it will not get done, okay? And then the other characteristic is that, it's a living plan. It's a living document, subject to change, right? I mean, new opportunities could arise, new challenges could arise that could impact, some of your strategies and tactics, right? So you just need to be flexible, constantly revisiting the plan, and, you're likely going to have to make some adjustments as you go along. Okay, so the way I do plans, I have sort of like the core part of the plan, right? And that includes, obviously it's sort of framed by your revenue goal, revenue goal by source. And then it's also, I think, another core element, as I mentioned earlier, is your development budget. And then the plan itself includes, this sort of more broad brush strategies. Remember, I talked about those themes that will arise right out of your assessment. Strategies and rationale for each, and we're going to walk through these, specific tactics or activities, and then for each one of those tactics or activities, who's responsible, what are the time frames, okay? And then the other thing that's sort of outside kind of the core piece of the plan are supporting documents, right? So I'm doing a plan, and I'm going to keep it very focused on this sort of spreadsheet, actually. But beyond that, I'm going to have several supporting documents, which are going to, because I might be listing an activity in the plan that needs further, kind of fleshing out, or how to do this, and so I'll include supporting documents as well, and I'll show you examples of that in just a few minutes. So there's no right or wrong answer in terms of what your plan looks like. As I said, I don't like to really do a lot of narrative, a lot of prose, and the first plan I ever did, which was several years ago, many years ago. I did it sort of, a Word document, beautifully written, 25-page narrative. I swear, I think it was probably looked at once by my client, and that's the last thing I want, and I'm sure that's the last thing you want is to go through all this investment of time and maybe resources to create a plan, and then nobody uses it. So I created this format, and you're welcome to, you'll get, or I think it's even, you can download a template, which looks just like this. I like this. This is actually an Excel spreadsheet. And, so as opposed to doing 25 pages of narrative in Word, I'll do it could be, who knows, 5 to 7 pages of Excel spreadsheet. And I like it just because I think it's easy to reference. So, as you can see, on one side, you'll have your strategies. So you have strategy here, and for each strategy, you'll include a rationale, and we'll talk about why that's important in a second. And then several activities that, once you do those activities, you're going to sort of address that strategy. Who's going to do it, right? Lead, support, what quarters, or you could break it out by whatever you want, months. And then, if there are any associated costs, right, that are going to hit your development budget, you can throw them right here. The other thing that I think is really useful is to indicate how each strategy, even each tactic, if you can, corresponds back to your strategic plan, right? Because this strategy that I'm talking about is fundraising, essentially fund development or fundraising strategy, as well as things that might not be directly fundraising, but really relate closely to it, whether it's marketing, visibility, or investment in your board or whatever. This is your strategic plan. So I really like to do this because I think it again, fosters buy-in from, again, if you need to advocate for the plan itself or specific resources, you can sort of say, hey, this is in a strategic plan. This is how we're gonna, how we're gonna raise the money for these specific elements of the plan. Okay. I had an attendee of one, I was giving this same sort of workshop, but in person a few months back, and one of the attendees said, well, what we do is we actually embed the fundraising plan right into our strategic plan. So I thought that was pretty cool, and that's a neat way to look at it as well, right? So you've got your strategic plan, your strategies of your strategic plan, and then under each strategy, you've got some of this information, right? Exactly how we're gonna go about raising money for that. So that would work too, I think. And then one other thing that's not here that you can add is, again, I talked about supporting documents. If there's any strategies that sort of, or tactics where you have a related document or something that fleshes it out more, that's going to be kind of part of your full plan, you can kind of reference that. You can create sort of a reference column as well. All right, so I apologize for this slide. This is brutal. Next time I do this, I really got to change this up. But this is pulled from an actual plan I did. And so actually, let me go back one slide if I can. So I didn't mention over here sort of the overview on the top. And so that's what this is. Basically, it kind of sets the framework for the plan. And so in this particular case, this organization, another excellent organization based in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston, and not a huge organization. I think their budget was I don't know, between $2 and $3 million, and but they got a lot of attention for their programs and program models from very large national organizations, the Kellogg's of the world and the Kresge's of the world. However, they had received support from them for several years, and they knew that some of them were going to be sunsetting, right? They were going to stop funding them. And so they decided, hey, we need a fundraising plan because we're going to have to kind of make up that revenue from other sources. So anyway, so this basically says, talks about that, and then it says the following plans designed to guide the revenue generation, and then I list the broad brush strategies that are in the plan. Okay, invest in the development infrastructure, clarify roles, yada yada. And then I say successful implementation of these strategies and tactics will both help the organization achieve their FY18 revenue goal of 4.5 million. Okay, so it's bigger, 4.5 million. Sorry, and position it to raise more money from diverse sources going forward. So the point of this is really kind of sets the stage, for the plan itself. Okay, this is an example of a strategy that was in that plan. Now, you're going to have strategies that are a little bit more specific to raising money, right? So you might have a strategy which is, where our goal is to significantly bolster giving from our business community or something. And then your activities will show exactly how you're going to do that, and they should tie in right to your revenue goal. Hey, by source. Hey, $50,000 of our revenue goal is coming from the local business community, right? This one is not directly tied to revenue generation, but indirectly it is, because this organization did not have anything written down, and they were sort of, the left hand didn't really know what the right hand was doing around fundraising. It was leading to inefficiencies and potentially some missteps, which could impact their fundraising. So anyway, develop and codify development policies and procedures, and then included some rationale for why that's important, right? It ensures a consistent and fair approach, yada yada, helps with new staff training, and then gift acceptance policy. That's one of the activities which I'll show you in a second, why that's really important, a gift acceptance policy. So sort of providing some rationale for why this strategy is in the plan, right? Okay, and then of course you're going to have your activities. So again, there's a strategy again right here, and then these are sort of abbreviated versions of the activities just to kind of get them on the slide. But specific things. Each one would have a time frame attached to it. What quarter or quarters are we doing this in? Who's taking the lead, and so on. And again, if there's a cost associated with anything, that could be included as well. Okay. So try to get much more detailed with the activities. Okay, then as I alluded to already, right, supporting documents. So these are just some examples of some that I've put in, I've included with fundraising plans. One thing that I will definitely include as supporting documents are results of the assessment, right? So fundraising SWOT results, any analysis I did on those trend reports of giving and so on, super important. And then others just have to do with whatever this, they have to be related to the strategies and help flesh them out more, or provide templates and tools that the organization can use to be successful in carrying out those activities of their fundraising plan. Okay, so they're sort of tools to drill down more on the how, right? More detailed steps. Okay. And then the last thing I want to go over, and this is really critical, is the importance of monitoring and evaluating. So you've gone through this process, you've created the plan, right? When I think of monitoring, I think of sort of continuously looking at the plan and evaluating maybe something a little more formal every 6 or 12 months. Okay. So what are you monitoring? What are you evaluating? Well, number one, of course, you're looking at plan execution, right? Are those activities being carried out by the people who are assigned to do them in the time frame that they're supposed to be doing them? Okay. So that's really critical. And let me just back up and say, you need to designate a person or a group to do this, to play this role, this ongoing role of monitoring the execution of the plan, right? And so, again, that could be this fundraising committee, it could be a subcommittee, whatever it is. But again, accountability is critical. Excuse me. So you need to designate somebody to lead that process. Okay, so plan execution. And then, of course, you're monitoring whether or not you're generating the revenue that the plan is designed to help you generate, right? That seems pretty obvious, but you should be looking at that on a regular basis. And then you may have other metrics that you're looking at that might be part of your plan, right? Like, so maybe you're trying to increase the number of donors or number of donations or the number of grants that you're pulling in, right? So going beyond just the dollars. So I'm not sure how many of you, I'm sure some of you have heard of SciBunt and LIBunt. So these are indicators of donor retention. And I'm going to just find them in a second, but let me just say donor retention is so critical, right? I've heard donor retention is the new donor acquisition. You need to spend a lot of time focusing on your current donors to make sure they continue to give, right? So cultivating those donors and thanking them a lot, recognizing their support, keeping them apprised of what's going on, providing them opportunities to stay involved with the organization, to volunteer, to come to events, and so on. Super, super important. But so many CRMs, donor databases, have these stock reports that you can just run. So LIBunt means last year, but unfortunately not this. So these are donors who gave to your organization, who did not give to your organization, in the last 12 months, say, but they gave in the previous year, right? Last year, but unfortunately not this. SciBunt, same situation, but they gave some time in the past, right? So they haven't given in the last, say, 12 months, but they gave some year in the past. Okay, these are really important. So these are your lapsed donors, and these are really critical reports to run because I would hope you'd want to do some special outreach, very focused campaign on these groups to try to get them back in the fold. Okay, donor attrition is a huge problem. I think the statistic right now is it's at 45% for new donors, so folks who give once but then they don't give the following year, around 45% drop off there. And apparently donor attrition over the past decade has been growing nationwide. So, you definitely need to spend a lot of time on that. So anyway, I'm going off a little bit, but the point is this could be, and I recommend this is something that you're measuring and could be part of your plan. Okay? And then what else? The fourth thing that you're monitoring and evaluating is, well, you're looking at your budget. And just like you would with your full organizational budget or your program budgets, you're looking at your development budget. And you're looking at expenditures versus your actuals versus your budget. And are you spending more than you said you were, or you're staying within your budget? And keeping track of that will help you track your return on investment. Just, again, you want to make sure that you're not spending more than you're bringing in. That would be a problem. Okay. So one thing I really recommend with the monitoring piece, I I think pretty much every plan I create, I include this as one of the strategies of the plan. Literally, it's like the last strategy, like, you know, so that it's really front and center. So I just want to, really just reinforce how important that is. And the thing is, again, we talked about the plan being a living document, and you're going to try certain strategies, you try certain tactics. Some will work, some won't. You're going to learn from them, and you may need to pivot mid-year. You may have planned to do a particular type of donor cultivation event, quarterly, but the first couple of tries were really unsuccessful. So you're going to switch it up. So that's just the way it goes. So I mean, those were sort of the slides I have, and so right now this is just the opportunity to open it up to you for questions for whatever remaining time we have. So, Hershey, what do we got?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kenny. So one of the questions that came in, I think may have been answered as you were going through the slides, but just to reiterate, when you were going through the slide, the template that you created for the 12-month fund development plan,
yep.
One of the participants had a question about whether or not you would add your funding goal on this.
Yes, sorry, yes. Thank you. I'm actually glad they brought that up. Yeah, absolutely. So again, if any of these are tied to specific goal, right? Like you might have a strategy that's related to bolstering individual giving. You can absolutely, yeah, and I recommend you do. Sorry, and I'm glad you brought that up because I should have said that. You can include in here, and you should, what that goal is for that particular revenue source, right? So as I mentioned in the overview, you'll have your overall fundraising goal, right, for that year or however long, and then you might have specific revenue goals by source, which you should absolutely include in the plan.
Great, thanks.
Other questions? I'll hang out. This is a good time for you guys just to type away.
Yeah, here's another one. You create a fund plan for each revenue source.
That's a good question. So I don't create a separate plan for each revenue source, but yeah, I mean, your strategies kind of break that out, right? So again, you might have a strategy that is focused on, bolstering corporate giving, right? So in that sense, that's, breaking it, and then you would have another one that's focused on bolstering individual giving, so you can do it that way. So there's sort of like, almost like plans within the broader plan. But I just have one plan, and then the strategies are the, sort of get into a little bit more detail in terms of revenue generation by source. So I hope that's helpful. Guys, if I'm answering a question that you chatted and you have a follow-up, feel free to type that in as well.
Yes, please do. Our next question is essentially related to org budget or just staff capacity.
Okay.
So maybe you can answer it from both perspectives. But the question is, we don't have a development director, nor do we have much time to add many extra tasks to our current development operations. What types of strategies could be high value but low cost to us?
Yeah, and this is a struggle that's common to particularly small to mid-sized organizations, right? You don't have a lot of staff capacity. So first of all, again, I would just bring up I don't know if this particular person or organization has a fundraising committee, but they can add a lot of value. And one of the clients I'm working with, I'm also working very closely with the fundraising committee because the client, literally, there's the director. They have pretty good program staff. Their programs have grown quite a bit, but they're very light currently on development. And in fact, they had a development associate that recently left. So the fundraising committee suddenly, knows that they need to step up a bit, and I'm sort of working with them on that. So I guess one thing would be to see, to build a fundraising committee if you don't already have one. And the fundraising committee, yes, there should be some people on there who have some fundraising experience, but they don't all have to, right? And you probably want to have at least a couple board members on the fundraising committee as well to serve as that liaison to the board as a whole. So that's one strategy is again to rely a bit more on volunteers. It's tricky because you do have to manage the fundraising committee, and that takes time, but usually it's worth it. And then, otherwise I would say just be realistic. You have to sort of start, I guess, two things. Be realistic in your goals. Without that infrastructure, remember we talked about at the very beginning that study from, that was published in the Stanford Social Innovation Review, that did find that if you have a fundraising plan and you do invest in development staff, you are going to see a high return on investment. So, oftentimes small nonprofits are very hesitant to, hire development staff, right? They might have more program staff, but frankly, that's the revenue driver of your organization. So, in my mind, yes, I'm a little biased, but in my mind, that's exactly where you want to invest, is in the development staff, again, with a good plan, and you get obviously quality people in, you're going to see a high return. So yes, you're a small nonprofit, but think about, where you can go, whether you can get a grant or, whether your board can help support, even if a part-time development staff person, to start to, whether to focus on individual giving or grants or whatever the case may be, you will see a good return on investment if you have a good plan in place. And then you'll just build on that from there. But until that point, you just have to be realistic with your goals. If you're really short-staffed, you don't yet have a strong fundraising committee, you just got to take small steps and look for sort of what I call that low-hanging fruit, right? There's some things that might, some strategies that are not that difficult or resource-intensive to accomplish. So if your board doesn't all give, or they don't feel like, whatever they're, maybe start with the board and bolster their role around fundraising for your organization, which is what they're supposed to be doing anyway, and then go from there. Do you think that answers the question here, Hershey?
Yeah, no, I think that was great. Thank you. But obviously, the person who asked the question, please feel free to send a follow-up if you have one.
Yep.
But right now, I'll ask another one on behalf of Steve from Commonwealth Shakespeare Company.
Sure.
Asking, with limited resources, it may be obvious, but we should think carefully about how we allocate staff time against individual, corporation, and foundation fundraising. Do you try to proportion the time of key staff against these various streams?
Say that last question again. Do I try to do what?
Do you try to proportion or maybe allocate the time of key staff against these various streams of fundraising?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? It's going to depend on your plan, and again, I'm a big advocate for bolstering the individual giving. People often say, okay, let's try to get grants out the door. I mean, the truth is, if you're talking about private foundations, and it's going to get more and more competitive. Particularly with these cuts coming down the road. To secure them, and particularly if you don't have a good track record. That's the sad sort of catch-22 about all this, right? I mean, the nonprofits that potentially need these grants the most are often the most challenged to get them, because funders tend to be conservative and they don't want to be the first ones in the door, so they're sometimes hesitant, right, to give to an organization that doesn't have that track record. And the other thing with a lot of foundation grants and certainly government grants is they're restricted. Many of them are restricted, and so that limits what you can do with their money. Whereas again, individual giving, even corporate support, tends to be unrestricted, and then you have a lot more flexibility with those funds. So again, my feeling is if I had to, without knowing, I mean, of course I've heard of your organization, but without really knowing a lot about it, I would focus on the individual giving piece and try to really bolster that and try to secure more unrestricted funds.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Our next question is, what are some good resources for nonprofits who aren't well versed in marketing, for example, for seeking more private donors? So I think, to your point of kind of investing in individual donors.
some resources for sort of researching individual donors?
I think the way it's articulated is resources for nonprofits who are not well versed in marketing, I think, as an example. But generally, I think good resources for seeking more private donors, and I'm interpreting that as individual donors.
Yeah, I mean, so there are a couple things. If we're talking about individual donor sort of research, number one, the first thing you should probably do is, who are the comparable nonprofits out there? Now, I'm sure each one of you feels like your nonprofit is very unique, and I'm sure it is. But I'm sure you also know that there are other nonprofits that might be serving a similar client base, or working on a similar issue, whatever the case may be, and might be in a similar geography. So the first thing you want to do is see who's supporting them, right? So you want to go on, if you can get their annual reports, do that. I mean, honestly, if you're looking at major donors, you can go and look at their, if they've gone through a capital campaign, they may have a wall of donors that you can take a look at. So researching who's supporting comparable organizations is always a good way to start. And then there are tools you can use to do donor research. Wealth Engine and others that can help you do that as well. So just starting there, I think, is probably a good thing to do. But also, I would just start brainstorming, right? So with your board, if you have a development committee, and trying to oftentimes when you ask a board member, and I'm sure many of you have faced this, you ask a board member for a list, or your development committee for a list of names, they don't give it to you, or they give you very few, right? But it's interesting, and I just did this with a client 2 nights ago, met with their board, and they were considering doing a capital campaign, and the director was complaining to me prior, like, the board's not really forthcoming with this stuff. Well, we had a brainstorming session, like an exercise, and all of a sudden the names just start flowing. And, oh yeah, I know this person, and this person can get me to this person, and so on. So having brainstorming sessions can be very powerful in terms of thinking about the various networks of your board, and even your staff. Your staff may have some interesting networks as well, or relatives, and so on. So that's a good way to start.
Great, thank you. Next question is, what percentage of your budget should reasonably be sourced from grants?
What percentage of the revenue should come from grants? Do you think that's what the question is?
Yeah, it says of your budget, but yeah, I think same.
Well, there's no right or wrong answer here, right? I mean, I've worked with clients that just have very strong relationships with foundations, right, and they do really well with grants. I just worry, when more than 50% of, more than half their funding is coming from grants, because, first of all, again, as I talked about, a lot of them are restricted, so, you don't have that flexibility with the funding. And, if you're too reliant on one source of funding, and that, something happens and that goes away, are you going to be left, sort of stuck? So, there's no right or wrong answer. As I said before, nationally, only 15% of private funding, not including government grants, but private funding to nonprofits comes from foundations, right? Whereas 80% comes from individuals. So, use that maybe as a yardstick, and again, see if you can, if you're heavily grant funded, a strategy really should be to think about, specific tactics to bolster your individual giving, to raise the proportion of funding coming from individuals and decrease the proportion coming from grants. But I can't really say flat out, it really depends on your organization and the environment in which you work. I can't tell you specifically, you 30% from grants. So, but anyway, I hope that helps.
Okay. We have a question, or maybe a statement and a question.
Okay.
Our revenue goals, and I think our fundraising goals have increased annually, but we don't show a similar increase in program or visitor services. Can this cause a problem with donors?
Okay, yeah. So raising more money, but you're not seeing a growth in the amount of money that you're investing in the programs, sounds like. Yeah, I mean, that could be a red flag, right? I mean, so, so sometimes, first of all, let me just say, donors and funders will often research a nonprofit before they invest in them. And by the way, this is just an aside, but you guys should all have a profile for your nonprofit on GuideStar, guidestar.org, okay? Because a lot of funders and donors, potential donors, are looking at your organization through GuideStar. And so it's a great opportunity for you to build your profile in there. It will include your 990 forms. And so, yes, some will absolutely look and see what proportion, of your revenue, how you're allocating your revenue, right? So what proportion is going to program, what proportion is going to fundraising and admin, and so on. And so yeah, just you need to be aware and cautious, and maybe raise a red flag internally if, it's great that you're raising more money, but where's that money going if it's not going to program? So, are you doing very expensive events, and are those events, are you losing money on those events, or not really raising much money on those? So yeah, I think it could be a red flag to potential supporters.
Okay. And then one thing I was thinking of when I was reading the question is potentially the cost of the program has increased, or basically, yeah, the cost of the intervention has increased. So I don't know if that's where the question was coming from as well, but that might be something too that you might need to articulate, right, to your donors.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I guess just right. So, particularly if you're going back to the same folks, right, for support, you may need to be asking for increased grant or increased gift, and you need to provide the rationale as to why you need that. So, yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And if I can make an amendment or add another resource to your point, Kenny, about putting a profile up on GuideStar. The Boston Foundation also manages the Giving Common, which is kind of a localized version, actually in partnership with GuideStar, an opportunity for nonprofits to share their stories, their narrative, resources, as well as financial info with potential donors. And we know that there are a number of local foundations that have leveraged that platform as well. So just another plug, if you haven't created a profile already, we do have a great team here that's willing to be helpful in doing that.
Yeah, and I'll just sort of piggyback on that, he or she. Yes, the Giving Common is really important for those who are in this area, in the sort of Massachusetts, right? And the staff over there that at the Boston Foundation that works on the Giving Common are excellent, and they're really helpful in helping you create your profile and pulling that information from GuideStar and so forth. So, and I believe, isn't it true that if they actually want to apply for a grant to the Boston Foundation and some other foundations, they actually have to have that filled out, the Giving Common?
Yeah, that's right. So for our discretionary grant making, to our impact areas or cross-cutting strategies, the majority of them do require a Giving Common profile. For our newer, I guess, grant making initiative, Open Door grants, there's a kind of an abbreviated profile. Certain fields of the profile is required. But yeah, again, just another opportunity for folks to get their information out there. And you're right, there are other local foundations that use that as use a profile as a requirement as well. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yep.
I think this is actually a follow-up question to the earlier question around, resources around, I think, marketing, and I think it was actually for pitching the organization. So I don't know if you have any tips or resources for that, or maybe something we can address kind of through the follow-up email.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, so fundraising and marketing do go hand in hand, and so I think it's an important question. I'm not a marketing specialist, sort of that's not my area necessarily, but yeah, so it might be hard for me to come up with really good resources for you. I would think that, number one, just internally, developing your case for support, as I talked about before, is really critical. And doing it as a group, taking a half-day board and staff retreat and going and banging out a really compelling case for support for your organization is really the first step, But in terms of sort of marketing tools, I'd have to research that a little bit.
Okay, great. And if it's out of the scope, don't worry about it, Kenny. Just thought I'd ask just in case.
Yep.
Our next question is, what kind of track record do you need for grant providers to feel comfortable supporting you? And
yeah.
in parentheses, it says the nonprofit reference has been in existence for 1.5 years.
Yeah, that's a great question. And as I was sort of mentioning before, a lot of these funders can be very conservative, right? And so it can be hard if you don't have a track record, both the track record in fundraising and the track record programmatically. So if you're a new organization or you're raising money for a new program, you need to speak to a couple of things that will help instill confidence in the funder, right? So you need to number one, speak to your leadership, and again, if they're new to the organization or the organization's new, whatever, what were they doing previously, and how are they using that experience and expertise and bringing that to bear on this organization and this particular program. The second thing you can do is really speak to the evidence base, right? So, okay, we're launching this new program, but this is based on research which has demonstrated X, Y, and Z. So it's all about, when you're appealing to funders, and I do a whole separate sort of grants training, and I talk about this. It's all about instilling confidence in the funder, right? Both around your organization and around whatever program you might be requesting funds for. So yeah, it's challenging when you can't say, hey, over the last few years we've done X, Y, and Z, but there are ways to get around that. So I hope those are a couple of helpful tips.
Mm-hmm. That's great, thank you. Our next question is, can you give us a list of those engines to help with researching donors? So maybe not a comprehensive list, but maybe the top ones you'd recommend?
Yeah, what I think what we should do is sort of maybe just send them after the fact. We can sort of shoot an email out. Well, I know we're going to do that anyway, he or she, and include some of those resources.
Okay, got it. We have a couple more questions, but please feel free to continue putting them into the chat box so that we can make the most use of this time. I will say that Kenny, you're getting some great feedback generally, just saying great handouts. Thanks so much to Kenny for sharing his thoughts.
You guys are too much.
Yes, he's saying again that the list would be super helpful, so thank you. Another question we have is, tips for engaging the board in their fundraising efforts or in the creation of this plan. And I know you touched upon that a little bit earlier. I know it was also kind of a hot topic in the in-person workshop yesterday, so I'm curious if you have some high-level recommendations for that.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's a great question, and yeah, the more the board can be involved. Now, I'm not saying that you want your full board to be working on your fundraising plan. That's probably not realistic or efficient. But again, if you're pulling together a team, it would be great if a couple of board members were on that team, right? And then the creation of the plan, it should be sort of an iterative process. So again, you don't want to just kind of do this and without showing it to folks. So I do recommend that as part of the process, you share a draft of the plan with the board, and garner their feedback on the plan, because they could have some really great ideas. And maybe they could be a little shocked, like, oh wait, we're supposed to be doing this, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So in that, so in terms of the plan, those are a couple of ideas, and then, I mean, in terms of fundraising, again, so it has to start with them understanding what their role is, right? And this is a challenge. I know several of you, if I've got executive directors, on the line here, I'm sure are facing, particularly if you've inherited a board, right? You were hired, this board, most of the board members were already there. They don't do anything around fundraising, and it's a challenge, a tough position to be in. So I hear that. I talk to folks like you who are in that position all the time. So ideally, your board chair is on board with this, and if they're not, that's even a bigger problem, right? Because then it's up to you as the director to kind of manage up, right? To at least start with the board chair and say, board's not doing anything around fundraising. If you look at the 10 basic responsibilities, board source puts this out, the 10 basic responsibilities of nonprofit boards, and you'll see resource development in there like twice. So it is a fundamental responsibility of a board, right? So the first, I guess what I'm saying is like, the first step, and it's not always an easy one, is getting them to understand what their role is around fundraising, right? And then what I would do is, so once you set those expectations, don't go crazy, right? Don't set really difficult tasks to them, right? They might be really well-meaning folks, but they're also probably very busy. They might be a little hesitant because they've never done this stuff before. So, if you look back at that handout around sort of the checklist of things that the board can do, some of them are easy, some of them are fun. I mean, who doesn't want to make a call just to thank someone for a gift? You're not asking them, you're just thanking them. So there's a lot that the board can do, which is really easy and not heavy lifting, which will at least get them started. Get them thinking like, oh, okay, yeah, I see my role. And then the other thing is, again, just around, serving as sort of ambassadors for your nonprofit, right? So they need to understand that, when they're wherever they are, they need to know what your pitch is, right? And they need to be able to speak sort of succinctly, but also compellingly about your nonprofit to potential supporters. And so, but at a real base level, fundraising is about developing relationships and just sort of sharing their story. I mean, each of your board members should have a real, probably a special reason, unless they were just on your board because they were asked to by your director. But otherwise, a lot of them have a real emotional pull, or maybe they're a former client or whatever. They have an emotional pull to your organization, and so you can support your board in sharing their story with their networks. If they do nothing more than that, I mean, that can be really powerful. And you can do that. You can help them with the language. You can set up something online. And I mean, there's a lot that can happen there. That's really the basics of fundraising and being an ambassador for the organization. So anyway, I hope those are some things that give you some food for thought.
Yeah, definitely. So going back to the SWOT analysis,
yep.
Curious if you have, from your experience consulting and in your professional experience as well, if you see common weaknesses and or threats across, nonprofits, like maybe, the ones that you see most often, and then, what are some ways to reduce or mitigate those weaknesses or threats?
So some of the most common weaknesses and threats that I see. Oh, good question. Let me think. So, certainly the board, board is, I'm not going to beat that dead horse, but certainly, lack of board involvement in fundraising is a very common one, and I talked a little bit about how to address that, right? What else? I would just say, again, working with a lot of small to mid-sized nonprofits, it's just, people feeling like they just don't have the capacity, to do all they need to do, to get enough grant proposals out the door, or to create a few, maybe 3 campaigns a year or 3 appeals a year. So a lot of it is just time and being resource strapped. And sometimes I'm sure some folks on the line here are just, you're one executive director, you might be the one paid staff member in your nonprofit. That's possible too. It's tough, and so you do have to set realistic expectations around that. I guess I would say is, the more you can figure out how to invest in the development infrastructure, say, hey, board members, we need to bring in, even if it's just a, 1 or 2 day a week person who can, help us figure out, an appeal to a particular segment of individuals. You can start there, or, a very part-time contracted grant writer to start getting grant proposals out the door. But I think the more, again, it's very common, you're resource strapped, but again, investing in the development infrastructure is, however you can figure out how to make those investments, those are going to reap positive returns as long as you have a good plan in place. And so once you do that, then you're starting to build up your revenue more, and then you can think about more substantial staff for development.
Great. The next question is around monitoring. What are some recommended activities or tactics around monitoring, given that you gave it such great importance in the webinar?
So the key is, so one thing is, just to reiterate, is that, you need to designate a group or a person to do that, right? Because it won't happen for the most part if you don't, and hold that person accountable to kind of holding everything else accountable. So I think that's a really important piece to this. And then just understanding that, monitoring is not just sort of like you do your plan and then after 12 months you revisit it and say, okay, it's time for a new plan, how did we do? That's like the worst thing you can do. So the more you can sort of stay on top of it, every month, the more successful you'll be, because, if anything is not working, you'll have time to pivot or adjust or, try something new. But if you wait too long and suddenly you're like, no, why aren't we making the money we said we were going to make, then that defeats the whole purpose of having the plan. So I would just say, designate someone to take the lead on this, hold them accountable for the monitoring piece, right? And staying on top of it, doing it on a really regular basis. So there'll be no surprises at the end of the fiscal year.
Great. So that was our last question. Again, a couple comments around, thanking you for an informative and useful webinar, those kinds of things.
Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it.
So I don't know, Kenny, if you have any, final words or parting remarks or anything before we close?
No, just do go back to your work, man. It's hard. I guess I do have a parting comment, which is I realize it's hard to carve out the time to do this. So, but again, it's totally worthwhile to take the time to plan. And again, you should, whoever's on the line right now, you shouldn't feel like you're the only one to do this. Get some help, and that's another reason to build the team, right? I mean, so you can kind of divide some of the work. Instead of time frame, we're going to do this over the next 3 months so that we'll have a plan in place by a particular date, and go to it, because it really will help guide your fundraising and hopefully help you achieve your goals.
Great. Thank you again, Kenny, for taking the time, for sharing your expertise with all of us.
Sure.
Yeah, and on behalf of TBF, I just want to thank everyone also on the webinar for, your engagement, for all of your questions, for, the words of thanks that you guys are popping in. We really appreciate it. We sincerely hope that you found this webinar and this time to be informative, that you feel more knowledgeable about creating an actionable strategic fund development plan. Again, we will be following up with all registrants with a copy of the slides, a link to the recording, a couple other resources, and also an evaluation. This helps us with our planning going forward in terms of future workshops. So we'd appreciate it if you could share your thoughts via that evaluation. Until then, please feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any further questions. And we wish you a wonderful day.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Okay. Bye.
Bye now.